Good evening and welcome into Tennessee Volunteers Live here on the Voice of College Football Network. Tucker Harlan alongside Jordan Binkley with you tonight. We hope you guys had a great weekend. Thank you all for tuning in. If you like what you see, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe to Tennessee at the Voice of College Football on YouTube. Really helps us out. Helps you get closer to content that you guys enjoy. Share it with a rival fan too. Why don't you? Uh, if they want to hate watch us over the course of the offseason. As you guys can probably see, we are not alone in studio tonight. We have a very special guest with us. Uh, we have Rocky Top Insider Zone, Ryan Shumpert. He's a fellow Brentwood High School alum. We love to see that. In fact, we got 3 Williamson County guys on the show tonight. That's incredible stuff right there. If any of you guys are disc golf extraordinaires, his grandfather has a park named after him in North Knoxville. You've probably played there if you are a disc golf extraordinaire. So go check it out. Ryan, we're happy to have you with us tonight, man.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me on and for the warm introduction. It's kind of a shame, there's the dog park and the disc golf that's real big at Tommy Shumpert Park. And I don't have a dog and I don't play disc golf. So I've gotten out to the disc golf once, lost a disc in some high grass, but no, again, appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, I got to be completely honest with the disc golf thing. I play every now and again. I have friends that play, so it's just one of those things where it's like, I'll grab myself some discs every now and again and just throw them out there. But I like the wooded disc golf courses more than the ones in the open fields. So that's why I enjoy that one the most in Knoxville.
Yeah, I would say I'm kind of the same way because I have, played a handful of times over years. I'm just not good. I'm not good at throwing the disc with any distance. So, sometimes I get lucky and miss the trees in the wooded area and I can play it better. Where the big open long holes, I'm just, slowly plodding along, shot after shot, well above par.
Yeah, well, I've managed to get to par on a few of those holes, but I can't pretend to be like I'm going under all the time on disc golf. But that's enough disc golf. You guys did not come here to listen to us talk disc golf analytics on the Voice of College Football Network. Ryan, this is very much the off season, if you will, in college sports, really. Although there are a couple of things going on right now. I know you guys at Rocky Top Insider are keeping up with them. And one thing I did want to ask you before we jump into the football, you're a Cubbies fan, so I know you are always going to be invested in Major League Baseball. But you are one of the handful of people on the Tennessee baseball beat that was there before this thing really exploded. Do you have like this proud father type feeling watching some of these guys making their debuts in MLB? Because it's the number's growing right now. It's like doubled in the last month of guys that are just in the league at the same time.
It really is, and yeah, I would say yes. I mean, I've had it with Crochet for a handful of years because he was again one of those early guys on the 2019 team that it's such a shame we didn't get the 2020 season because I think he was in for such a big year for Tennessee then too. But Garrett Crochet, one of the early memories I'll always remember is the last weekend of SEC play. I believe they were playing Ole Miss in 2019, and kind of still in a pretty good spot, but still on the bubble a little bit to make the tournament. And Crochet was starting, I believe, this Sunday game, and he took a liner back to the face and had to get surgery on his jaw and pitched 2 weeks later in Chapel Hill in the regional and pitched well too in 2 different games. I think he threw about 4 innings because Tennessee lost to Liberty their first game there on late Friday night. Rain delay, I think, started at like 10:30. So crawled out of the loser's bracket, made it to the winner's bracket, lost to UNC, but Crochet was a big part of that. So I've always had a tremendous amount of respect for him because of that and the toughness he showed. And he, along with Andre Lipsius and Al Solari, were really kind of the first stars of the Tony Vitello era. So I've had that one with him for a number of years. And, now it's just cool to see more and more guys make it up, and especially how quickly some of them have made it up. I mean, obviously Dolander in just over a full year in minor leagues. Obviously, Simo's made it up super quick. So it's been super fun to watch those guys. It's been fun to watch some of the guys that are still in the minor leagues too. But performing really well. Jared Dickey's had a really good year. Blake Burke, I don't know why he hasn't gotten promoted. He'll probably be in our neck of the woods in Nashville before too long. So it's definitely a new, unique flair to the professional baseball experience in the summer of following those guys and seeing how they were doing. Because even before I was covering it, I kind of have my eye on some of the Tennessee guys, and obviously Mookie Betts being from the Nashville area at Overton, but there just weren't many of them, so it's a whole different level now with what Tennessee's got. I believe 9 of them now from the Vitello era have made it to the bigs.
Yeah, and the thing too, not just with Blake Burke making it to Nashville here eventually, because I think he will, but a lot of these guys come through the Southern League, right? Like,
Yeah,
Simo obviously did. Blake Burke will get there eventually when he's down in Biloxi. I don't know how you feel about him. I don't know if you claim him, but Chase Burns did come up with Chattanooga.
yeah.
So it is cool getting to watch all these guys, especially come back and play, because you got that new park in Knoxville too, which I think makes it even more special. You don't have to trek all the way out to Kodak to see the games.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, just I went to a couple games last week, actually. It's the first time I've seen the new park. But Ryan Galani, who didn't end up playing at Tennessee, but was a
Should have been a
commit from
vault.
Wofford. Yeah, one of my favorite terms that you only get to use in baseball, former
Yeah.
future VFL. He was on the Birmingham team. And then Mark McLaughlin, who was on the 2022 team, was also is on Birmingham and pitched a scoreless 8th inning on Saturday night. And even some of the big names just in general from the SEC. Hagen Smith, who was the SEC Pitcher of the Year in 24 for Arkansas, started that game on Saturday night. So it's definitely super cool to see some of those guys come up, and hoping more of them get in the Cubs system. More of the Tennessee guys. I mean, they had Liam Spence. I think he got maybe a cup of coffee in Double-A.
He's
And
banana
now
balling right now, right?
he's been. He's not on the Savannah Bananas team, but he's in the
whatever
banana
you want to call that
universe.
league.
Yeah, the banana universe. So, but now, we just need to get a few more of these guys in the Cubs system, and I don't know, we might get it this year. I've seen both mocks with Andrew Fisher and Gavin Keelan going to the Cubs.
Yeah, well, that's obviously the major topic in sports right now is MLB, and you're getting to cover some of it with these Tennessee baseball guys going into the league at a rate at which we've not seen in a long time, if ever, just from the Tony Vitello era. But there is another major topic in the world of college football right now, and it's kind of funny because it used to not be like this, but really the last 3 or 4 years, it's kind of become the trend for all of these guys, these football prospects, to commit in the summertime. Tennessee, of course, had a very big weekend. You had 4 commitments over the weekend. Kedrick Golston, the edge rusher, Edward Baker, the offensive lineman, Zayden Anderson, who is listed as an athlete. He's a wide receiver, really a two-way player for Greenville in-state. And then, of course, Legend Bay, who is also listed as an athlete, but plays quarterback. Shump, I don't know if you're a huge tape guy. I don't know how much tape you watch on all of these recruits or just guys in general. But what stands out to you about this latest haul for Tennessee over the weekend?
Yeah, I think the Legend Bay commitment's just super exciting. He's just so dynamic, and he plays, as you said, plays quarterback in high school and does passes a little bit. I think he threw for maybe 1,400 yards last year, but is just a freak with his legs and how agile he is and just dynamic really with the ball in his hands. Is super exciting to watch, and doing it in a good league too in the Dallas area. So I would say he's kind of the guy that stood out the most with just he's got a little bit of like Boo Carter. When you watch Boo Carter's tape of it, it felt like the first 2 guys weren't going to take him down on any given play. And then Zay Anderson, I think, just from the less about him as a player, and I think he's a good player and all, but it's just kind of crazy. It feels like Greenville, Tennessee, is becoming the college sports hotbed all of a sudden. Obviously got Jacoby Gillespie over at Tennessee, and then Trey Thompson is one of Tennessee's top targets in the basketball recruiting trail too. A 4-star recruit who's really blown up. So always knew Greenville high school, the Green Devils, good 4A football program. Feels like they're pretty solid in every sport, but not a school I typically think of producing a lot of SEC talent. And they got quite the run going on here, and Tennessee's, at least on two of those three guys, been able to capitalize and land some local standouts.
Yeah, occasionally you can find some diamonds in the rough up there in Upper East Tennessee. Of course, here recently, John Fulkerson was a big one from up there in Kingsport. But yeah, Greenville, like you mentioned, you got a couple different guys coming out of there across a couple different sports that have found their way to Tennessee one way or another. Of course, Jacoby Gillespie was at two other destinations before he was at Tennessee. So, of course, you had the big haul this weekend. Tomorrow, there is a chance that the recruiting news picks back up again.
Yeah.
And these two guys are actually teammates. Four-star defensive lineman Darion Albert and four-star linebacker TJ White are both from Jackson Academy down in Jackson, Mississippi. And this is something, Jordan, you and I have talked about on the show before, but Mississippi, not a state that Tennessee recruits super heavily. I mean, it's not devoid of football talent. It's just, there's only a handful of guys that you can really spout off that were impact players from the state of Mississippi over the years for Tennessee. But do you think, Shump, that these two guys are somewhat of a package deal? You think it's like one guy commits to one place, the other guy will follow him?
I don't necessarily think it's a package deal. I mean, you just kind of look at the schools they're considering. There's not a ton of overlap. But I do think Tennessee is in a good spot for both guys. And obviously Tennessee is, I think, kind of it could be missing one. Because I do think maybe they both took, or at least Arkansas was in the mix recruiting both of them. But Tennessee in their top groups is kind of the common denominator. So maybe not a package deal. I don't think that is how they were viewing the recruitments, but could very well end up looking like that if they both end up in Orange.
Okay. I did see that both of those guys were projected there by a couple different recruiting services. I want to say maybe Mississippi State was trying to compete for Albert, but he shut down a visit there. So obviously that's a good sign for Tennessee. I did see the news earlier today about Joel Wyatt pushing back his commitment. Tennessee and Vanderbilt were initially the two schools that were in his top two, but he has pushed back, and I've noticed that he's getting a couple more offers as well. I want to say Oklahoma and maybe Louisville was another one that offered today. Do you think there are some late contenders there for a guy that's another in-state priority?
I do wonder about the Oklahoma one. It seems like they're pushing to try to get him on a visit. I think it's just a very unique recruitment because Tennessee and Vanderbilt are, I think, offer two really different things, and the recruiting pitches are completely different. I mean, you're talking about Tennessee wants him to play edge, be an edge rusher, put on a bunch of weight, be a pass rusher, and be a Leo in Tim Banks' system. And Vanderbilt wants to play him a receiver and defensive back. So you just talk about the pitch being completely different. I think the path to playing time much easier at Vanderbilt. I mean, you think about him having to put on all that weight to get on the field at Tennessee if he's going to play Leo, on top of Tennessee just being a deeper and better program. I think, I do think Oklahoma maybe weighs in. I also just wonder how much thinking he's still kind of doing over that situation, because it's a very, very unique one.
Yeah. Any other recruits you see right now on the horizon that I did not mention already?
No, I think those are kind of the imminent ones. I mean, I think everybody remains on Tristan Key watch to see if anything really changes there. Which you're right. The aspect of, I was trying to think about earlier today. I don't know about you. Can you guys think of anybody from Mississippi Tennessee signed? I mean, like John Slaughter was a South Haven guy, so that's kind of technically Mississippi, but really more Memphis.
Yeah.
Like they recruited Cam Akers out of Mississippi, but
I mean, like the only famous player that comes to my mind is Billy Ratliff. That is the only one that I can give you. And that's been a minute. Like, because I do look through those record books every now and again that they distribute, but yeah. I couldn't tell you one just off the top of my head outside of Billy Ratliff.
Yeah, it's just not really an area Tennessee recruits a ton. And it's to your point, like there's not a ton of big recruits there. And when there is, LSU's a lot closer.
He's much
Alabama's a lot
closer to
closer.
Hattiesburg. Yeah.
Yeah, the in-state schools are obviously involved, especially Ole Miss where they're at now. So it's very rare, and you're seeing Tennessee going extremely hard after three of those guys. It just feels super unique.
Yeah, I think we are definitely still on that watch. Although I've told Jordan this in the past. I kind of get the sense this is one of those recruitments where it's, he's just testing out other schools, but in reality, he's staying at LSU. I don't feel overly confident in Tennessee's chances in getting Tristan Keys right now.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like if he's going to flip, Tennessee's probably the best spot just from the Faison Brandon connection, and Tennessee's was his top contender when he committed to LSU. But I would agree. I'm kind of in see it to believe it mode on that one.
All right. Well, we are crossing the bridge into talking season now. SEC Media Days, 2 weeks from today, actually. It's coming up really quickly. I finally acquired my Phil Steele magazine. I wait patiently for this thing every year. Athlon and Lindy's, they come out. Athlon is late May, mid May. Lindy's is usually a little bit later, and then of course Phil Steele's even further down the road. Sean, do you get into preseason magazines at all? Does that cure boredom for you in the summertime?
Yeah, I feel like I used to be a huge one, and now it's very dependent on what I'm doing for the family vacation, I think is the big thing. And when the family vacation is. Like last year, now and it'll probably flip back to the summer. My brother has kids, but they're still before getting to school. So we went to the beach in the fall last year during the bye week. But if I go to the beach, I'm going to get one at the grocery store. That first stop when you get down to the beach at the grocery store, I'm going to get one. And then if I'm, laying around at the pool or beach, I'll read it over the course of the week. If we're doing more like sightseeing vacations, less likely. So kind of hit or miss. Used to be every single year locked into it.
Yeah. Well, there's obviously several reasons I asked, just because I have looked through all of them. I thumbed through Athlon and Lindy's over at Barnes & Noble the other day just to see what they had to say about Tennessee, what they think about Tennessee ahead of the season. And then looking at projected orders of finish, I believe Lindy's had it at the lowest at 11, Athlon splitting the difference at 10. Steele is somewhat confident. He has Tennessee tied at 7th with, I believe, Ole Miss and Florida. And, usually Steele, his picks can be a little bit more out there from what I've observed. But the only one that I found this year that, didn't look super rational was South Carolina tied with Auburn at like 11th in the league, which is kind of bizarre. But I say all that to ask, Chump, is Tennessee, is it getting enough attention right now, or do you think it's not receiving enough attention, adequate attention at all?
It's a really interesting dichotomy because, and it feels still just completely matches up. I think the human eye and the more just analysis is lower on Tennessee because of the Nico situation and because there's just so much uncertainty on the offensive side of the ball. Anything analytic based really likes Tennessee, and Phil still obviously is a lot of that. ESPN FPI has Tennessee really high still. You see it with the Vegas betting odds, which are obviously very heavy analytic. Still have Tennessee in that 9 win over under range. So it's really interesting. I lean more towards the common pundits aren't giving Tennessee quite enough credit, just because I think the schedule is still pretty manageable. To me, it's all about if they can avoid the bad loss, because you just reflect on what Tennessee was last year. Their offense wasn't very good. The passing game certainly wasn't very good. Look, Tennessee does not have Dylan Sampson in that room. I don't think they'll have a running back as good as Dylan Sampson, but I'm going to have to see Tennessee not be able to run the ball under Josh Heupel to believe it's not going to happen. Like they've just run the ball really well every single year, even in 23 when they didn't have a very good passing game, and obviously 24 they didn't either. So I think they're going to be able to do that. The defense, still, I think there's a lot of reasons to be really high on. So you saw Tennessee kind of go to that 12 personnel game, manage the game, play field position, don't make mistakes. And you saw them do that last year. You saw the willingness to. It's a lot of the same recipes on this team, and the schedule remains pretty manageable. So, I think 9-3 is very in play with that. You do, at least I wonder, do they have the ceiling to steal one of these games, whether it be Georgia, Alabama, or Florida? That's where I think they probably don't have quite as much gas as they did last year, and certainly, 2 of those games on the road as opposed to 2 at home. There's the even schedule years always play much better for Tennessee with Florida and Alabama at home, and obviously they've had all sorts of trouble beating Georgia no matter where that game is. So, I don't think the sky is going to fall. And I think when you see some of those predictions, like Tennessee's going to finish 11th in the SEC, I think that's maybe leaning a little bit more to that side.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's not unfair to rank Tennessee that low. I wouldn't say, but I get why people are not super high on Tennessee this year. Just kind of putting out a feeler there. But there is one thing that a lot of these preseason publications are high on. It's kind of funny, honestly, is the Tennessee DB room, because for 2 years that was the laughingstock of this football team. Athlon and Lindy's both had that unit as a top 10 unit in the country. What is your reaction to seeing that dramatic turnaround just within a 2-year period, basically?
Yeah, it is pretty crazy. I mean, even last year going into the year, that was a huge question mark. And I will say I was pretty high on Tennessee's corners because I liked Ricky Gibson going into year 2, and I thought Jermon McCoy was a really good pickup. Just because I think people slept on how good the quarterback play was in the Pac-12 in 2023 with some of those guys. But, Caleb Williams probably being the most notable one, Bo Nix. I mean, it was the best quarterback conference in 23, and Jermon McCoy held his own as a true freshman. The safety play is what I didn't see coming. And not that the safety play wasn't as good as corner, but Will Brooks emerging the way he did, Jacoby Thomas being kind of a force in the run game, that room was a good deal better than I expected. So I think when you turn to look to this year, I think it's all about what Jermon McCoy looks like. When does he get back on the field? How effective is he? Does it take him a while to be back to the same guy he was last year? Is he capable of being even better than he was last year after missing a full year with a torn ACL or a full offseason with a torn ACL? I think that's the big question, because Ricky Gibson, Colton Hood, those are really good gets. I think basically everybody is. I'm super high on what Boo Carter is going to be in year 2. I don't love the safety room, but I think it's fine. I think it's serviceable. Tennessee does a really good job of limiting big plays, and they're going to play the guys that are steady back there. So I think that room has the potential to, be top 10 good. I don't think that's an overreaction or over dramatic. And but it'll probably be kind of like I said, the ceiling I think will be decided by how quickly and how effective Jermon McCoy is when he gets back on the field.
Yeah, and you mentioned safety too, and that was one question I had. Jacoby Thomas leaving in the spring was a little bit of a shock for this team. A guy that was a bit of a hit stick out there for you. He leaves on you in spring ball and kind of leaves you scrambling at that strong safety spot. And I think for the most part, we know who is going to play each position on this team, who's going to start at each position. That's the one that I'm not entirely sure about. Who do you see coming out and potentially getting that strong safety job?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think maybe it's just a natural connection because of the way Jacoby Thomas played, but I think Idris Farouk, he played similar, showed those flashes, plays quick to the ball, really good in the run game. As it's an explosiveness from the safety position that I think Jacoby Thomas had. I think he has as well. But I think you obviously know Turrentine's going to be back there in one of those spots. And then Tennessee, there's not a ton of depth, and they're asking somebody a young player to step up. Maybe it's Caleb Beasley. I think he would probably be my second guess there. But no matter who it is, it's going to be more youth at that position Tennessee is accustomed to under Tim Banks, because they've been very weary to play young players at that spot the last handful of years.
Well, your strong safety projection just aligned with the projections out of the preseason publications too, because
Okay.
Caleb Beasley was one of the guesses. Farouk is in, I believe, both Athlon and Lindy's, and then Steele was the one that had Beasley. But again, I agree with you. I could see either one just because we don't know a whole lot about that spot because it looks like Colton Hood is presumably behind Jermon McCoy. Do we know when exactly he will see the field? Do you think he's on track to start this season, or is it going to be like a Cooper Mays situation in 2023 where it may just be like a rolling delay?
Yeah, I think it's wait and see at this point. I think some of it's obviously going to depend on what he looks like and how comfortable he feels when he gets out there and is closer to full speed running around in practice and doing some stuff with contact. So, I'm sure Josh Heupel will say that he's progressing fine, and they think they're going to have him back for the season. I'm sure that will be the talking point as talking season rolls on. But obviously, Josh Heupel and injury reports isn't always the most accurate. So to me, that's a big question mark.
Yeah.
It's up in the air.
Yeah, you could definitely still fudge an injury report. I know just because I wasn't around as much last season, but I do remember Cooper Mays will be ready this week. 3 weeks past, he's still not out there.
Well, I mean,
But
the Cedric Tillman one I think is the most jarring. Like he
yes,
literally had a high ankle sprain, and they were like, "Yeah, can't roll him out this week."
no,
Didn't play for five more weeks. Had
yeah.
surgery.
What were the other two? Did he play in that Mizzou game? And I know he had that catch against South Carolina in that.
Yeah, he came back against Kentucky, I think.
Okay.
But then he missed another game. He missed another game late that year too. I don't know because you're right. He his best game was against South Carolina, ironically, and he played
Yeah.
against Georgia. Yeah, I'm not sure. I know because I know he missed another game. Maybe it was the Vanderbilt game he missed
Yeah.
late, but he was never quite the same guy at Tennessee.
I wouldn't want to destroy my ankle on slick turf either, like it was that night.
Yeah,
But
no kidding.
yeah, but now that we mentioned the offensive side, I do have one other um, primary position question because again, I think we know for the most part who gets the start on offense. We talked a little bit earlier. There will not be a Dylan Sampson on this team. There are potent running backs, but you just won't. We don't think we'll see that this year from Tennessee. Who is your betting favorite to get that job right now?
I think you're going to see it be a lot like it was in 23, where it's just who starts, who knows, but it might be different game to game, but it's going to be relatively evenly dispersed carries, and you'll see them ride the hot hand. I would probably lean to Sean Bishop as the starter or the player that going to receive the most carries against Syracuse to start the season. But for me with Bishop, it's just like, can he stay on the field? Can he stay healthy? I mean, he missed a month last year. He tore his ACL the year before. I think obviously I've seen less of Star Thomas, and obviously much less in a Tennessee jersey. But I think Bishop has the highest upside of any of those guys. And again, like we were saying, on a team, on an offense, is probably going to run the football a lot. I think that was set up for him to get maybe the most opportunities.
Yeah, and I think that's my and most people's pick to get that job right now is Deshaun Bishop. Star Thomas, it's funny because you would think Bishop would at least be in there in some of your preseason publications. There's one name on there that I did not see coming at all. That's Peyton Lewis. I forget who put it out exactly, but I'm just like, really, Peyton Lewis? Like, did you watch him in his limited carries last year? I mean, it was like this very low ceiling, low floor, feast or famine type run game you had with Lewis last year. Not to say he can't take another step this year, but I don't feel like he's ready yet. I feel like Bishop and Star Thomas are a little bit more ready to take on the big reps as opposed to Peyton Lewis right now.
Yeah, I tend to agree, but I mean, I think Peyton Lewis is going to get a lot of carries too. I think he's going to be a big part of that room. Maybe it's a little bit less than those two guys. But like you said, he's younger. He's had more limited opportunities. It'll be interesting to see what he looks like as he does continue to get more run and maybe a little bit more comfortable in the SEC.
All right, so I've got just a couple more, and Jordan, you jump in here if you've got anything.
Yeah.
Um, but this year is the 5th year of the Josh Heupel era, and I think just with some of the things that happened back in April, expectations have been altered a little bit. What is the temperature on Josh Heupel's seat right now?
Oh, very, very cool. Not
Okay,
not hot in the slightest. I think things would have to have a very bad year this year for that seat to really be getting particularly warm. He's done an incredible job, I think, of raising the floor for the program, in which is part of the reason I don't think things are truly going to fall apart, in part because of the schedule too. I think sets them up in a decent spot. But no, not hot at all, in my opinion. I think you're still a number of years away from hot seat talk being legitimate about him. If he can't get over the hump, if he can't get Tennessee to whatever that looks like, an SEC championship, semifinals of the college football playoffs, more tangible proof that all right, he looks like he's close to getting Tennessee to winning a national championship. Because for all that he's done to raise the ceiling, which is a ton, and he's done a great job, he hasn't really shown too much that makes me feel like that's going to happen. But especially when your program is where it was when he took over at Tennessee, I think that's a conversation you probably don't start having until year 7 or year 8, as
okay,
long as the floor is high, which like it has been.
yeah, yeah. I think that's helped out a little bit, and you're looking at 23 as a down year at 9-4, which is the ceiling in the last 15 years before
Yeah,
Heupel was on the job, which I think you do have to think about that a little bit if you're a Tennessee fan. One thing I didn't ask you about, I probably should have earlier, the major elephant in the room with this Tennessee football team, which is the quarterback position.
yeah.
Um, and I've already forgotten if I mentioned at the beginning of the show, but I am not in my normal abode right now. I am in a mountain resort near the quaint town of Blowing Rock, North Carolina. You know what is 10 minutes north of Blowing Rock, North Carolina is Boone. And about another 5 minutes in, you get to Kid Brewer Stadium, which is the former home of current Tennessee quarterback. And what's that phrase you use to describe the baseball players?
Former future.
But it applies to
It
him at
does apply to
UCLA,
him.
kind of.
Yeah.
It does apply to
Yeah, it
him a little
does.
bit there. But I think everybody's in agreement that he is the most ready for that job out of just the three guys that you got in that room. Not that those guys can't prove themselves over the course of this season, but just looking at it from a 30,000-foot view. How much of his tape have you gotten to watch, or like have you gotten to see a good bit of his highlights? And is it just one of those things where we think, or we just don't really know what we're going to get from this guy until we see him play? Just a high number of snaps against SEC football teams. Is that the case?
I lean towards that. I mean, look, I've scrounge through what you can find, which that's a little bit of the problem with Appalachian State football. It's not like it's a ton of stuff just readily available to watch of him. But yeah, I think you're right, and I think a lot of it's just the aspect of the offense is a lot different that he's going to be running at Tennessee, and so much of what is a big part of his game, which is kind of risk taking, playing off script. Um, it's not Josh Heupel's offense at all. It's a lot of structure. It is a lot of throwing the ball on time. A little bit of improvising is obviously always going to be in any offense a factor, but it's not a ton of that. So just how does he fit in this offense? The turnover aspect. He turned the ball over a lot at Appalachian State. Josh Heupel's offense really mitigates interceptions for quarterbacks. It makes it harder for them to throw interceptions. How much does that factor over? Because I think that's the most interesting part of this whole situation, because I think you're right. Has more experience. He's the most ready guy. I would be surprised if he's not the guy running out there for the first snap against Syracuse on August 31st. But I kind of look at his game, and I kind of look at Jake Merklinger's game, and I look at how this Tennessee team's built, and I kind of wonder if Jake Merklinger's not a little bit of a better fit. I think he's a little bit more of that game manager guy. He's a little bit more of that, let's limit mistakes, let's take what's there, let's let our defense and run game win us games. Which doesn't mean, Aguilar can't evolve and do a little bit more of that, but you just don't see a ton of that at App State. So, Tucker, when you say, are we just going to need to see a good bit of it and know what it looks like? I think that's accurate, and I think that specific reason is maybe the biggest.
Yeah, and that's a fascinating point you brought up there about Merklinger, because I feel like just of all the quarterback recruits, transfers, what have you, in the Heupel era, he is kind of the most slept on, just because doesn't have that 5-star rating, didn't play that much high school football to begin with, just as a lacrosse player. But I mean, you look at his numbers his senior year of high school. What was it, like 38-2 touchdowns, interceptions? It's
Something
a crazy
like
number. And I mean, it's obviously high school and college are different games, but that's reminiscent of what Hendon Hooker did here. Not a lot of turnovers. So that is something that it's not something I've thought of a whole lot, but it's definitely now on my radar now that you said it.
Yeah, I think to your point about him being slept on, I don't know. Maybe this is mean. I don't think anyone really ever expected him to play. Like, he kind of felt a little bit Tavon Jackson-esque, where it's
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, you knew Tavon Jackson, you knew it was going to be Hendon, and it was probably going to be Joe for a year, and it was going to be Nico, and it felt like Merklinger comes in after Nico, and you knew it felt like Nico was going to have at least one more year, or 2 years with Merklinger in the program as the starter. George McIntyre was a big top 15 recruit at the time. Obviously, he fell down the rankings a little bit more, and then when Faison Brandon kind of came into frame, it's obviously 2 years removed, but that's another real big name. It just never. It felt like Merklinger was kind of a guy because you have to take a guy. You got to take a quarterback every year for depth. It never felt like he was really going to be thrust into that role. And I think large part because his ceiling isn't as high as some of those other guys I named, but. And it's hard to draw a ton of parallels from playing what I believe was 2A Georgia football, but it feels like his floor is maybe a bit higher than a lot of those guys. And when you talk about a team that is good defensively, has a good running game, maybe doesn't really have national championship aspirations, it's just kind of trying to steady the ship this year after a lot of unexpected turmoil in the spring, I think Merklinger makes a good bit of sense.
Yeah. I think that's one to monitor, and of course George McIntyre is the one that I think many of us thought would supersede Merklinger, but of course he's only gone through spring ball, and that's all he's been able to do with Tennessee. But that's more than what Joey Aguilar has done, even though he's got more college ball under his belt. Just a couple more things from me, Shump, and then unless Jordan, do you have anything else?
Oh yeah, I was gonna ask. Tennessee lost a lot of receivers and safeties in this offseason. Are you concerned with Boo Carter playing both ways? Are you worried that he might be worn thin?
Yeah, I think that's just a fascinating situation. Like, you don't see it much. We talked about earlier, I guess it was with Tristan Keys, kind of a little bit of need to see it to believe it. I think I'm in a little bit of see it, believe it range with Boo Carter. I'm sure he's going to get snaps offensively. Is he going to get like legit 30 snaps a game, 25 snaps a game? I'm going to have to see that to believe it. So, yes, I think so. But I think you put the emphasis still on what he does defensively because he's, maybe a step further. But, I say that at the same time, I'm just very worried in general about the status of the receiver room. And I was before they lost all the guys in the portal. The room just has not been good the last 2 years, and they've done very little to upgrade it, in my opinion. So, to me, that remains one of the biggest question marks on the roster.
So again, just a couple more things from me, and then we can let you run, Shump. You've been a terrific guest. You are our first guest on this show, by the way.
Oh, what an honor!
Yeah. We
I'm feeling good now.
Normally we have a lot more to discuss, but it is kind of the dead time here in the world of college football. But again, recruiting will pick up at this time of year. Just a couple more predictions, I guess you could say. You mentioned the big three games on the season or on the schedule earlier in the show: Florida, Georgia, Alabama. Those are three games that every everybody that associates themselves with Tennessee football circles every year, just because you know that it is going to hold a lot of sway on the results later on down the road. Outside of those three, is there a game? Well, Oklahoma is the one that comes to mind, but aside from those four, we'll call it, is there
Yeah.
one that maybe we're not paying enough attention to this far in advance?
Yeah, I think I would say no to your answer of is there one we're not paying enough attention to. I don't think there's one that just stands out. I think you wonder what game pops up though, and what game is a struggle. Because look, it's just been every year under Heupel that in 21, whatever team wasn't that great, so you maybe don't count that. But the last 3 years, one they've dropped that they shouldn't have. So, it's typically been on the road. Mississippi State and Kentucky being the other two road games. Like neither of those teams look great.
Yeah.
Kentucky certainly, Tennessee's had a ton of success there. I would point to Syracuse or Mississippi State as being the ones that I would worry more about. Syracuse, I do think Tennessee's a good bit better. It's just kind of like the Joey Aguilar worst case scenario. He comes in, throws 2 early interceptions. Tennessee falls behind because you gave Syracuse short fields. Do you have an offense that can pull you out of the deficit? I think that's the one of the what I would point to is Syracuse, and then Mississippi State. Obviously, a lot of commonality between Jeff Levy and Josh Heupel. Have talked about the Tennessee system running the ball well. Mississippi State ran the ball well against Tennessee last year. Maybe Blake Chafin, has a good second year in the program, and that kind of fits the mold a little bit more. I think of like the South Carolina loss in 22 and the Arkansas loss last year. On the road, a little bit more than Kentucky does. So, no, like on paper, none of those games are just like, oh man, this is really sneaky. Like I think this team's a lot better than people are giving them credit for. But Tennessee's had enough of these hiccups away from home that I do think you have to pay attention to it, and you can't just chalk them all up as wins, even if on paper, you feel like Tennessee's double digits better than all those teams.
Yeah, I'm in agreement on you there. I would think, or in agreement with you there, I should say. Now, Tennessee and Syracuse not really knowing what's going on at quarterback to start that game.
Similar spots.
I think that's an equalizer. So that, if anything, would limit the Joey Aguilar disaster scenario, possibly, unless Steve Angeli goes out there and balls out for the Orange. And then Mississippi State, I just think that's one where it's like it's too early in the season to really justify me thinking that is a trap game for Tennessee. Because if that game is in like November, yes, absolutely, I would say that's one you could worry about. But I don't see it with that one. And then you look at the other two home games, like if you're not motivated to beat Arkansas and then beat Diego Pavia this year, there's honestly something wrong with the Tennessee football program. If that's the case.
Yeah. Well, one, you're 100% right. And I'm going to need to see Tennessee. Like, they've been so good at home under Heupel. I'm going to need to see them lose to someone that they are better than at home before I'm worried about it. I'll flip a question to you guys of the big 3 games, Florida, Alabama, and Georgia. Which one do you guys think is most likely Tennessee wins?
Jordan?
Out of Florida, Alabama, and Georgia?
Yeah.
Call me crazy, but I feel like Alabama.
Okay.
I feel like Alabama. I feel like Florida. I'm not excited about going into Gainesville and having to play them there. I know Florida always plays Tennessee the best that they possibly can. Doesn't matter if they miss a bowl game, they're still going to play Tennessee hard. With Alabama, for some reason, I feel like there's something going on with their psyche a little bit after losing Nick Saban and stuff. I feel like there's just like a little shadow like creeping up in their mind. And I just feel like Tennessee might get it done. I mean, I'm not like super confident in it, but out of those 3 games, I think Tennessee versus Alabama, I think Tennessee has the most likely chance of winning against them just because I feel like they got a little bit of a mental edge on Bama right now.
So I actually was on the Florida Voice of College Football show one odd night, I think in like May or something. And I said on paper that is probably the toughest game for Tennessee right now this season. I know it's late in the season, and usually Tennessee goes down there early in the year, which I think is part of the reason for the struggles because Tennessee just doesn't have things figured out. Florida looks like they have things figured out, and then just it's a collapse in mid October for the better part of the last decade. But I just think they are a little bit more sure-handed at quarterback right now than the other two are. I do think there is a lot of belief in Ty Simpson, and I know it's going to sound crazy because I do think, you just look back at the last decade, Tennessee's not been competitive with this team at home, remotely competitive. But Georgia, I just think the quarterback, the unknown at the quarterback thing. Again, it's the same thing with Syracuse. I'm going to say it again with Georgia. It's a bit of an equalizer. I don't trust Gunnar Stockton. He made one good throw in that game against Texas. I'm not saying that he's not a good quarterback and that he won't surprise some people this year, but I looked at him last year. I just wasn't that impressed, and even in mop-up duty because this is his fourth year in that program. So it's not as if he just hasn't seen the field. Like, they're not overly impressed with him either.
Yeah, I think Georgia would be my answer if Nico hadn't have left because of the Gunnar Stockton deal. If they win that game, I think it's gonna have to be like the A&M game in 23, where you score a special teams touchdown. You really muck it up because I just don't see Tennessee's offense having enough. Yeah. I'll complete the round table and I'll say Florida because of how late it is in the year. And because of how difficult Florida's schedule is. I just think there's, if Florida's got 4 losses by then, if they're not playing for the college football playoff, the Billy Napier hot seat talk. I just see, kind of to your point, Tucker, earlier, Tennessee playing Florida early, kind of before they've fallen apart a lot of these years. Things look better for Florida now. I do think, I'd probably say Alabama has a higher ceiling. They have a really high ceiling, and I think it could be a really difficult game. But the schedule is just so hard. I could see things going sideways for them. And if that's the case, I think that's more manageable for Tennessee. But all 3 of those are going to be really tough. And I think on paper, it's kind of difficult to see Tennessee winning any of them.
Yeah. And with the Georgia thing, I think it's not so much a game that Tennessee wins. I definitely don't think Tennessee wins that game. But I just think you could have one of those, shall we call it a good, bad football game where it's like 20-10. Yeah. You got multiple interceptions in it. Tennessee, it's not a good kind of competitive, but they are competitive for some reason against Georgia. Just again, because of all of the uncertainty, I feel like, and I think you bring up a really good point too about Florida Shump. And it's something that Jordan and I have talked about on the show before. How much do you really trust Billy Napier? We saw Jeremy Pruitt fake out an entire fan base in 2019 into thinking, the Georgia State game sucks, but you're at least going to finish 5-3 in SEC play, win a bowl, and then feel good about yourself in 2020. And then we saw how that season ended. Not saying Billy Napier is doing anything illegal, but again, how much do you trust him? It's the same thing with Shane Beamer at South Carolina. They've both got talented quarterbacks, but it just feels like there's a cap on what those guys can do. And, I feel like in years where you haven't been talking a ton about them, they end up, having a nice 8-9 win season.
That's true.
Because, like last year, I didn't bet an eye at South Carolina, and they won 9 games. But, that in the years where you are talking about them, like after they beat South Carolina in 2022, they're all thinking, okay, maybe they can take the next step in 23, 5-7. So, I do agree with you a little bit on the Florida, the potential for Tennessee to beat Florida. And also, I think I was talking to my parents about this last night, but the last time Tennessee played Florida that late in the swamp was in 2001 when they had to reschedule the game because of 9/11. And that's one of the better Tennessee football moments, I would say, post 1998. Still a good memory, despite what happened the next week. But people still look back on that moment fondly.
Yeah, no doubt. It's gonna be strange. I mean, they played late the COVID year. That game was in Knoxville. But I mean, and obviously the last couple of years, I mean, I say the last couple of years, the last 2 times it's been in Knoxville, it's been in October. But yeah, it's definitely just a completely different vibe with that game not being the third or fourth weekend in September.
Yeah. All right. So one more thing from me, unless you've got something else, Jordan.
I did have some questions written down here. Let me check them out. So what is one thing did you think Tennessee is going to have to get right this season to be successful?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Man, I think it's probably taking care of for the floor aspect, it's taking care of the football. For Tennessee to just win 8 games, 9 games, they just make everybody earn it. A lot of what they did last year, I think that's a big key. If you're talking about making the college football playoff, I think it's some way, somehow, they got to find some sort of explosiveness in the passing game. Just because I don't think this is going to be a passing offense that's good enough to put a lot of pressure on teams, drive after drive. Can they find a way to make some plays down the field? When Heupel does scheme guys open, can they connect on those plays? I think the offense is going to get back to being like a top 20 offense nationally, which it has not been either of the last 2 years. I think that's really what they have to do. And if you're talking about making the college football playoff and winning one of these 3 games that we're talking about and not dropping another one, I think that's probably what has to happen.
So I have one more, and this is a question that you're going to hear people ask about just about every team in college football. What is one player on each side of the ball, Ryan, that Tennessee needs to have a breakout season? Caveat, you cannot say quarterback on offense.
Yeah. Well, I'll stick with, what Jordan was just asking. I'll say Mike Matthews on offense. I really am low on Tennessee's receiver room. If someone's going to step up and be a difference maker, I think he's the most likely. Braylon Staley could maybe be a big play guy. But I think Mike Matthews offensively and defensively, name your pick at the edge spot. They got to have someone step up as an edge rusher to fill the pass rushing that James Pierce left. I think Josh Josephs is probably the most likely guy. He's played the most football there. He's played good last year, even though his pass rush numbers were not good. He was an effective player. But it could be Caleb Herring. It could be Jordan Ross. If one of those guys takes a step, they're all going to get opportunities, all going to be on the field. But that to me, that's really the one question there, and probably a little bit of depth in the interior defensive line. Are really the one questions I have outside of, the Jermon McCoy injury about that unit. And then, offensively, there's plenty of questions. I think Lance Hurd taking a Darnell Wright type step would go a really, really long way too. But I'll go with Mike Matthews being the guy on the offensive side that they need to take a big step forward.
Yeah, and I think the thought is that the injury is what derailed his season a little bit in 2024. We will be the judge of that this season. Then, of course, you mentioned the receiver room. I agree with you for the record on Mike Matthews, but the last time Tennessee had a receiver out of South Carolina that was flying under the radar, he won a Biletnikoff award.
He was pretty good, that guy, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was
number
all right.
11.
He was all right. Yeah. Maybe Braylon Staley can do the same. Take people off guard.
They win a Biletikoff.
Yeah. They're gonna have to. They're gonna have to find some guys this year at that spot. And they do like some of the young guys too. I stood on the field for the orange and white game, and I was right behind Rodarius Jackson when he made that just circus catch in the end zone.
Yeah,
that's one guy, and then Travis Smith Jr. is the other one that I keep hearing could potentially find a way onto the field sparingly, kind of like Mike Matthews did last year. But I would say the Heupel MO is to stick to fewer receivers than some other teams would in the league.
Yeah, I tend to agree. But I'm hesitant for the first year receivers, especially freshmen in Heupel's offense. But if there's anything about that receiver room, there's gonna be opportunities for guys. So we'll see. Maybe one of those young guys takes it and runs with it.
All right, Jordan, that's all I got. You got anything else?
I think that's it.
Well, Ryan, it has been great to have you again as the first guest ever on the Tennessee Voice of College Football channel. Happy to get to do it with somebody that I know. You can follow him on Twitter at rshump00. He and the boys at Rocky Top Insider, Rick Butler and Jack Foster, are always producing the content over there. What do you guys got rolling out there right now at Rocky Top Insider outside of the MLB and recruiting pieces?
Yeah, kind of baseball recruiting with the transfer portal. It does seem like it's dying down a bit for Tennessee, but we'll continue to monitor that stuff as the portal officially closes this week. And, Tennessee continues to have a lot of roster movement there. And then the MLB draft is going to be really big for Tennessee's roster next year. A ton of guys that could kind of go either way, be back or go pro. So we'll see what happens there, and we'll have full coverage of that along with, like you said, Tennessee football recruiting and, more and more Tennessee football stuff as we get closer and closer to the season.
Now, are you making your way down to SEC Media Days?
I am not. Rick Butler is going to have us covered down there for RTI, but I'm not making the trek this year.
Yeah, it's down there at the College Football Hall of Fame again, which
it's a great place to have it.
It is, yeah. I went there once, not for Media Days. This has been 8 or 9 summers. A really cool little venue. I mean, you could pull up any literally any team that you want in college football, and they have like 20 different players that you can select that were like considered all-time greats. They're like, you could click on Gale Sayers' Kansas profile. I don't know why I remember that one. Maybe that's the one that I clicked on. Yeah, you can click on all those. It's a fun venue. Did they allow you to kick field goals down there at SEC Media Days?
I don't think they did at Media Days, but I've been one other time and they did. And I'm terrible foot-eye coordination, and my field goal was an abomination. I don't know if it ever got above the upright.
Yeah, I consider myself a decent punter. I'm not good with field goals. I can tell you that.
Tough. It's tough.
It is tough, man. Maybe Pat McAfee is onto something at College Game Day. Him just taking over the world now that Lee Corso is gone. It's like you got him, you got the Kelseys, and that's all you got in the sports media world now in football.
Yeah, it's that's one of the best little running bits on College Game Day these days.
Yeah, Corso bowing out after the first game of the season, which is fittingly at Ohio State, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it Florida
very
State?
Fitting.
Yeah, Ohio State, because that's his first headgear pick.
Yep.
So, but it is talking season, and we enjoy talking to you, Ryan. It's always a pleasure to run you down and get to talk to you on some of the important matters in Tennessee football and also just important matters in the Tennessee athletics landscape as well.
Yeah, no doubt. Appreciate you guys having me on. Enjoyed it. And yeah, I'm happy to come on any other time when we maybe have a little bit more to talk about, or maybe a little bit of game tape.
All right. Well, that is going to do it for us this week on the Voice of College Football Network. For Tucker Harlan, for Ryan Shumpert and Jordan Binkley, I am Tucker Harlan. We will talk to you guys again next week.